You got a gun, you got a big gun, you got a gun, it's not a real one, and all you ever think about is running away, all you ever think about is trying to stay away from me.
And welcome back to another episode of the LoudMouth MMA podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Steele. This week, today I should say, another installment of the UFC Rewind series. We are on UFC 4, and by we, I'm referring to myself and Mr. Matthew Hitchcock.
Yo.
Hello, Matthew.
What's up, buddy?
I'm getting better at these introductions.
Yeah.
That's a practice.
We're getting better along with the UFC.
Yeah, man. And listen, and as my introductions get better, as does the UFC production.
It sure
because
does.
UFC 4 much better than UFC 3, and I thought that UFC 3 was much better than 2, and 2 is much better than 1.
Obviously.
You know, I mean, the production value, I think, is exponentially increasing each week. The guys who they're finding to commentate, for this one, it was Bruce Beck making his debut.
Nice.
I don't know how long he sticks around.
Nice
but
job.
I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, did a nice job.
Thought he was fantastic. You had, Jeff Blatnick,
legendary Jeff Blatnick.
yes, you know, who I guess had competed with or against or was on a team with Dan Severn. Did
Really?
you catch that in the broadcast? Yeah,
didn't catch
he
that.
apparently did something. He was a wrestler, and I don't exactly
you
know the
what?
connection.
That might sound familiar.
I didn't
It's
quite
coming back
catch
to me.
it, but he had some type of personal relationship with. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. So it looks like they were regular all the way through. It looks like UFC 15. So interesting. We're going to have a little stretch here. I don't know. I mean, that's what Wikipedia is saying. We're going to be watching them, so we will report back to you. But anyway, this was a great commentator team. And of course,
Jim Brown.
continuing his unprecedented reign as a commentator. Jim Brown for the first 4 events, Jim Brown, the only person
Only
to
guy
have
still
commentated for the first 4 UFC events.
He's doing
just
great.
Incredible.
He's getting better.
He's getting better.
He loves it. He loves it, man.
His pre-fight when every time when they're like, what can we expect tonight, Jim? Like before the night starts, every time it's the most like his eyes are darting away because he's clearly reading off a cue card, and it's obviously nothing he wrote because you can hear no sincerity in his voice, and it's all just this like mundane like, well, with these guys, there's no way out. There's no way out tonight. They're gonna be looking for a way out, but they're not gonna get a way out. And it's going to be great night of fights, Jeff.
The theme of the night is revenge.
And listen, these guys are going to get some revenge.
Yeah, they're going to get their revenge tonight. Hoist Gracie's looking for revenge because he had to quit early.
I don't understand the theme. What a bizarre revenge. Who's getting revenge?
Are we getting
Hoist
revenge on Steve Jenham?
I don't know.
Because he took the American dream?
Right? This was the first names I thought were, you know, first 2 especially, then you get to the American Dream and you're like, that's weird. And then you get to the Revenge and it's like, or what's it actually called? Give me a second. It
Revenge
is called
of the Warriors.
Revenge of the Warriors.
It's going to get weirder.
It sounds like a shitty movie.
It's going to get
Revenge of
weirder.
the Warriors.
Oh, it's going to get good.
There's 7 installments of that Revenge of the Warriors series. It was written by the guy who did Saw.
There's 2 things I really took away from the event, man.
Yeah.
D-Sev is a fucking
we always
beast.
start this way. We always start, I'm going to be so confrontational today.
D-Sev's a beast, and I fucking love Keith Hackney, man.
Okay, so those are your quick takeaways.
It's just quick takeaways.
My quick takeaways, we always start the episodes like this. Give kind of your kind of quick little, everything deduced down to one thing. I feel like I'm the only guy who was not impressed with Dan Severn whatsoever.
What?
And number 2, I feel like I'm the only guy who thinks Hoist Gracie is kind of a piece of shit.
Oh, well, yeah. There's a lot of people that still hold that opinion to this day.
Okay, good. Because I don't know. I don't know a lot about a lot of this. So I was like, I feel like I'm the only guy that's just like,
oh no,
he seems like a shitty dude.
Yeah, I hear
he always holds chokes way too long throughout these events.
And people are getting educated now. People are tapping and
he's always holding the chokes for way too long.
Yeah.
Even when the ref's trying to break him up, he's still continuing to hold him. Today he kicked Dan Severn. not today, for UFC 4.
Yeah.
He kicked Dan Severn as he was trying to, you know what I mean, as he was trying to get off of him after he had tapped. And that wasn't the first time he'd done that either. And every time, go back and watch these fights, with the exception of maybe one or two, okay, with some very limited exceptions, go back and watch after these fights when he goes to, quote, shake hands. He never makes eye contact, never looks at him, hardly even looks their direction.
Keith Hackney tried to be such a stand-up guy and take that loss on the chin. And
dude, he just kind of blows right past people. And he's done it for every single event so far that he's been in. He obviously missed an event, but he's done it for every event so far. Yeah. So I'm like, he seems like a shitty dude.
I mean, maybe it's just the time.
But I think that there is this thing in BJJ, right, which is honor, and like look at a guy like Damian Maia, right? Damian Maia wouldn't act this way, right? So when you and that's like the whole credence of BJJ, and this is one of the. He's not the founder, obviously, but I mean, this is direct lineage to the founder of BJJ.
Yeah, but
he was the first guy to be like in the heavy main stage of like American TV and stuff, right? He is like the face of BJJ at this point.
But they're coming from that era of like the Gracie Challenge and all those street fights and everything. You know, it's just got to be a different time. You know,
okay.
I just think maybe they're just used to having to defend themselves.
And to go back with Dan Severn. Because obviously you and I had two entirely different takeaways.
I love Dan.
Listen, I'm not saying I don't love Dan. I'm talking about Dan Severn, UFC 4. I'm not talking about anything else.
What about it?
Okay, so when we get to the fights, I'll talk about it. Okay. I won't do a long thing now. Okay. When we get to the fights, I'll explain where I'm coming from.
I love Dan.
I understand. I love Dan Severn too. This has nothing to do with whether I like or dislike Dan Severn. This is Dan Severn as it relates to UFC 4. I feel like I was supposed to be impressed with what I was seeing, and I just wasn't at all. So I'm excited to talk about that. We will get to that. As always, we want to give you some information about the event. UFC 4 took place December 16th, 1994. So as Matt noted before we started recording, you're about a year. This is about a year in.
A year.
Yep, which is awesome.
Yeah.
You're about a year in. The buy rate for this one considerably less.
We got 4 events a month now.
We do.
Crazy
it's
how
nuts.
far the sports come.
Buy rate was 120,000. The attendance was 5,857.
What was the buy rate?
120,000.
That's not
so
bad.
we're still not where UFC 2 was.
That's crazy.
But we're, I think, a little higher than UFC 3 maybe.
What the hell kind of marketing campaign did UFC 2 have to get 300K buyers?
I think UFC 1 was just so under the radar, and then people were like, what in the world is this?
We got to see this.
So that one just jumped.
Maybe.
And then you didn't keep a lot of people around. Not because UFC 2 wasn't good, because it was, but it wasn't nearly the spectacle. So I feel like people were just like, it's fun to watch fights, but whatever. It's not.
Maybe.
We're not seeing people's teeth get kicked in and that kind of thing.
That's just that buy rate's crazy for the time. It's just
it
still blows me away.
The other thing is UFC 3 was so bizarre. And all of the guy that won, in which he of course comes back.
Powerful
for
Steve
UFC
Jenham,
4.
by the way. UFC 4, powerful Steve Jenham.
Yeah.
That top game was vicious.
It was, man.
It was nasty.
And unfortunately wasn't able to keep going, which when we'll start explaining all the fights. But Steve Jenham, our UFC 3 champion. Here's a fun fact. And this is a little bit topical. I'm trying not to date these things, but I thought this was a funny thought, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. So we are recording this for January 20th of 2018. So if you're listening to this way into the future, what I'm saying right now is relatively topical. As of January 18th, 2020, okay? 2018, January 20th, 2018, Steve Jenham has fought more times as a UFC champion than our very own Conor McGregor, which I find to be a fascinating statistic. Now listen, Steve Jenham was not defending a belt, okay? But
Steve Jenham.
He was UFC champion of UFC 3. He fought one fight at UFC 4 where he was still champion.
GOAT. He's the GOAT.
He has fought. He hasn't defended, because again, he's not defending anything really, but he has fought more times while being a UFC champion than Conor McGregor, which is a fascinating statistic.
He looked pretty good.
He did. He looked like if he wouldn't have had to pull out, he could have made a run for it. He wouldn't have beat fucking Royce Gracie, but
could you imagine?
God, he would have been destroyed. Okay, Big John McCarthy, of course, is back with us.
Constantly wiping that sweat off his brow tonight.
Always. Listen, that's all he does. Listen, I don't know which is more iconic. John McCarthy dancing around the octagon, wiping sweat off his brow.
You gotta work!
Or the G-Man continuing, again, Jim Brown continuing his reign as the undisputed commentator of the UFC through 4 events. The G-Man.
Alongside the G-Man.
The G-Man continuing his reign through the first 4 as A, the ring announcer, and B, repeating people's last names.
Names.
It's so bizarre. Every time he does it, I'm taken aback by it.
Man, it never
even
gets
though
any-
I know it's coming.
It never gets less funny to me.
Listen, every fight that it happens, there's so many fights in these cards because it's a bracket. And every time it happens, I laugh. I don't not laugh.
We should have had a drinking game back in the day where every time he repeated the last name.
He'd be shit-faced, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I just I still want an explanation. And I know I've been offered an explanation by Sean Ihaz. Everybody go check out the DFS Sniper. He does the breakdown episodes with me. So if you're listening to this and you don't listen to any other podcast on my little network, I don't know what exactly you call it. I'm not
gonna say network.
But I guess network. But anyway, I break down every single fight card with Sean Ihaz and Tony Fagnano from MMA Today. So go check those out. But anyway, Sean had given me a reference that I don't quite remember, and he was basically saying it was a call to that. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's
Gotta call him up.
It's just I think I need to get a hold of the G-Man.
G-Man, where you
I
at?
think I need to get a hold of the G-Man and then go from there.
At LoudMouth MMA on Twitter. Hit us up.
Yeah, hit us up, G-Man. I know you're listening. All right. I think that is all. Oh, the winner received $64,000.
Such a random number, too.
Yeah,
This is
and
weird.
then I believe runner-up was like 19 or something.
Yeah, they're getting paid better.
Yeah, they're getting paid a lot better this time around, so we're continuing that. Did I say this was in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
I don't think so.
Did I say that yet?
Nope.
This was the first time in Oklahoma.
Yep.
Last time was the first time in like North Carolina, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And then both events before that were in Denver, Colorado.
Correct.
So they're starting to get...
We're on tour.
We're on tour right now. We're starting to get, UFC 5, just real quick, is back in North Carolina. So, they're sticking to the same areas here. That's because a lot of states, after UFC 1, a lot of states banned it.
Yeah, it wasn't allowed everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of states banned it. And I think we're slowly but surely, we're a year in now, I think everything's getting a little bit more above board.
It's going to be weird when we get to the dark ages here in the next 20 or 30 events or so when John McCain comes out against the sport and most of the states stop having it around. Like Dothan, Alabama, like the Rogan shows. Those are coming up.
I'm excited.
Those are coming up.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, should we get into the event? Anything else?
I'm ready.
Of course, guys, there are no weight classes, so remember that.
No rounds.
No weight classes. There are no rounds. There's no time limit.
No
It
biting.
is until someone gets finished. Now, we should be very specific here what the rules are.
No biting,
Just make
no
sure
eye
everybody knows,
gouging.
because this is going to come into play. The only 2 things that you cannot do is eye gouge
And
and bite.
That's it. Everything else
Now,
is
Matt,
go.
I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? Can you grab the cage?
You can grab the cage.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah, that's coming
Yeah.
up. There's going to be a change soon. but-
Well, and the reason why I'm asking you is because it happened. So,
Oh, yeah.
can you grab the cage, Matt?
Yes.
Can you headbutt, Matt?
Oh, yes.
And can you punch in the nuts?
Oh, yes.
All right, let's get into it. All right. Our alternate bouts, we do see one of these guys, Marcus Bossett, I believe was his name.
yeah, he comes in later, right?
Yeah, so he is the only one of our alternates that did wind up making it. Here's what's weird. So you had to fight Joe Charles versus Kevin Rozier. Kevin Rozier, very familiar face.
Coming back.
This was an alternate bout. And Kevin Rozier lost in 14 seconds by armbar. So a guy who I thought could have very well won
Or at least
UFC 1
gone deeper into the tournament.
could even make it 14 seconds with Joe Charles in an alternate bout. It
happens.
So now we didn't watch those fights, of course, but Joe Charles did not get a chance to come in. We only had one alternate this time around, which was fantastic because our last event was just
Full of alternates.
riddled
It was
with alternates.
plagued.
An alternate one. I mean, it was just a.
You didn't even
it
have
was
to
a-
fight at all the whole night. So it just
No.
it's
Well,
sour
I
taste.
also like the new system of in order to be an alternate, you have to win. So that
Yeah.
way you at least have a fight. You're not coming in off the street into a fight, well rested. You at least had the one fight.
Yeah.
and you had a chance to take some damage there. So that's good. And the way that they chose between which alternate got to come in, Matt, of course, the time tested coin flip. That is how.
What better way is there to decide other than maybe rock paper scissors?
Yeah, I mean, I really would have liked to have seen Joe Charles and Marcus Bossett. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I'm just going to call him Marcus. Joe Charles and Marcus walk into the center of the octagon and do rock paper scissors.
Now that would be
right before the fight, and then whoever wins stays in the cage.
The pay-per-view cost in itself,
right there. All right, let's get into our quarterfinals. Our first fight of the night was Royce Gracie versus a man in Ron. I believe it's Ron Van Cleef is how it's pronounced.
Correct.
At the time he was in the cage, I believe he was 41.
Twice Royce's age, basically.
How old was he when he made his debut? I'm trying to look it up. No, he was 51. He was 51 years old.
And Royce was what, like 27?
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, about double his age.
And
like a legit old guy.
Well, what I liked about him being 51 was that he looked 51.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't like one of those, like, he was 51, but like he looked like a young guy and he could take on. No, he had like that. He looked like, oh my gosh. What is it? He looked like Morgan Freeman almost. I mean, it was like an old Morgan, like a young Morgan Freeman. You know what I mean?
Give him credit, though, dude, because we're at UFC 4, and the motherfucker knew what he was getting into at this point. He was not scared.
No, and it meant that this is a guy who, and I'm going to say the same thing about Dan Severn later. Man, I wish that the UFC would have been around when Dan Severn was 25, 24. You know what I mean? Like, he could have really... He could have been the Royce Gracie. I mean, honestly, like, I think that's a guy who really could have done a lot.
He was close. He could have.
He did
a lot for wrestling, man.
He did. I mean, absolutely did. And this guy, Ron Van Cleef, obviously wasn't fucking scared.
No.
He knew what he was getting himself into at 51 years old.
And UFC 4, too. We've seen plenty of people get their teeth kicked out of their skull at this time.
And I'm glad he fought Royce. Because
safest fight possible,
and Royce basically just took him down immediately.
Safest fight for Royce probably too. So I think it might have been booked that way on purpose.
Had to have been.
Yeah,
they're trying to protect Royce.
Plus, they know he's going to have to fight probably 3 times. He's probably going to win.
Yep.
So let's give him as little damage as possible.
Let's make sure that he's not going up against a guy like Keith Hackney that early, who's going to be able to inflict damage.
Hackney was a bad motherfucker, wasn't he?
Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about that. So, really not much to talk about. The fight lasted for almost 4 minutes.
What was that one? Was that a choke or an armbar?
That one was a rear naked choke.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a rear naked. God, I cannot wait for this next one. That was a rear naked choke.
Okay.
Anything else on that fight?
Not really.
Unremarkable. Took him down, stayed in top position for basically the entire time, kept rotating, soften, just boom, land the choke. There it was. Yeah. It was ended. I mean, the guy had really no business being in there with anybody, let alone someone like Royce, who was...
But you got to give it to him for trying.
Dude, 51 years old.
Yep.
Congratulations, good sir. You are a true American hero.
You have earned the respect of these basement dwellers.
You have. All right, next up we had Keith Hackney taking on Joe Son.
What a great moment.
All right.
What a great moment in history.
We talked about Joe Son last week. Joe Son was the, I believe, manager of, what's his face?
Chemo Leopoldo.
He was his manager.
Yes. The inventor also of Joe Sando.
Oh, my God. Every time they said Joe Sando, I was watching and Justine was like, what? I was like, his name is Joe Son. He invented his own martial arts. It's called Joe Sando.
It's basically how to lose while also looking like you have no idea what you're doing.
Oh, my gosh. I'm so excited. Okay, to recap from last week, if you didn't get a chance to listen to UFC 3, here's some information about Joe Son. Joe Son is a guy who, he was a manager for Chemo. Okay, then this fight happens. I'm not going to tell you what happened in this fight, but I believe a lot of people felt sorry for Joe because they're like, what a horrible way to go out.
Don't worry about it.
And what a, quote, kind of bitch move on Hackney's part to win that way. So I think, certainly at the time, I'd imagine, and even if you don't know any historical context, you're watching that just going like, who does that to another man? Like, come on now.
Probably.
Now, let me...
Totally legal, though.
Now, let me now fast forward where Joe Son is convicted of a crime. His DNA is ran through the FBI system, Come to find out that he was involved in a violent gang rape.
He's what we call in the business a real piece of shit.
Yeah. He's then sentenced, and while in a holding cell, kills the guy who's in there with him.
Which was the only fight he ever won.
Yeah. And is convicted of manslaughter and is now serving life in prison. So the way that he was finished in this fight, in retrospect, perfectly fine. Couldn't have happened to a better person. So let's move on to
Could've
Keith
used
Hackney.
A couple stomps in there.
Yep. Let's move on to Keith Hackney versus Joe Son, my friends.
I love Keith Hackney, man.
Here's all we need to know. Joe Son, I will say in Joe Son's favor, so he outweighed Keith Hackney.
And was a foot shorter.
It was a foot shorter, which I thought was just...
That's a feat.
He looked like a chihuahua. You know what I mean? Like, you ever seen those, like, mean fucking chihuahuas? Like, I'm not talking, like, the teacup chihuahua. I'm talking those, like, they're not any bigger than my dog
Little
with pug.
shaky,
they're not any bigger than my pug.
Bare
right?
teeth.
But they are just, like, and they have muscly shoulders. You ever seen those kind of chihuahuas?
Yeah.
That's what he looked like, man. He was just this, like... He looked like a wrestler. I mean, really, that's the best way to describe. He looked like a wrestler.
Big, thick thighs.
Yeah,
Looked like he had a strong base. Wasn't tall.
No. What was his actual? Please don't tell me they call it Joe Sundo. I'll be really unhappy. Taekwondo. So the first one, by the way, Ron Van Cleve, it was karate. So I didn't say that at the time. It was BJJ with Royce Gracie, of course, versus karate. Keith Hackney's American Kimpo taking on Joe Son Taekwondo. But also Joe Sundo. Okay. All you need to know about this fight, Keith Hackney takes him down at some point. I don't remember who took who down.
I think
Keith Hackney finished on top. That's all
Joe
that matters.
takes him down.
And then Keith Hackney gets on top.
Yeah.
So Keith Hackney gets on top. He does it once. Once when they're standing on the feet, Keith Hackney decides, hey, I'm going to punch him in the balls.
Yep.
And he does so.
Yep. And it kind of drops him a little bit.
Kind of drops him a little bit. He winds up getting top position and then decides, I'm going to punch him in the balls again.
I'm going to break my hand again.
So then he punches him in the balls. And then he goes, let's go and punch him again. He does it again. He goes, you know what? Let's do it a couple more times.
There's 7 more.
Then he does it a couple more times. He goes, you know what? Maybe a couple more times just for good luck. I don't know how many times he hits him in the nuts.
For a guy
I'd have to go back and count.
For a guy that broke his hand in the prior event, you'd think he would have picked a safer method of attack than punching the hard cup. But fuck it, man.
So
it was there.
He said, screw it. So the way that he gets the finish is so bizarre to me.
He basically just like, and I mean, you'll have to excuse my terminology here, but this is what it's called. And he rape choked him.
So he like basically like grabbed. So he's on. So down in the bottom, he has a hold of his shorts, and he's like squeezing the shorts back and like kind of pulling them down, but really getting a good grip and like keeping his hips flat on the canvas.
Yep.
With his left hand,
he just chokes
Keith
him.
Hackney. He's basically with, imagine hold your hand in a C, okay, grabbing, one side of his throat and is just squeezing.
And I don't agree with the terminology, by the way, but that's where I come from when we were always wrestling and
that's
doing
like
martial arts.
Called.
That's what they call
probably,
it.
I don't know what it's actually called, but I mean, it's...
Vanderlei Silva did that to Keith Jardine once upon a time, and I'll never forget all the people that I watched the fight with still called it that. And I was like, okay, I guess that's still what we call it.
He's grabbing him with his hand, and it was... I guess that's how he gets the finish. It just looked really wonky because you're like, what is happening?
He was just choking him with his hand.
At first, I thought, is he like tightening the shorts against his crotch, and that's how he's getting the finish? Like, what is happening? Because if you look, he's pulling his pants down.
He's doing both, yeah,
bro.
But it's the choke. It's that hand choke on the neck.
Here's what I have to say about Keith Hackney. Whether I believe he's good or not is either here nor there. Here's what I got to say about Keith Hackney. #savage.
He's got killer instinct.
The man's a savage.
He's a savage. He came to win, and he came to win by any means necessary.
Keith Hackney has what Sage Northcutt doesn't have. Like, I've always loved... I know I'm dating this podcast quite a bit.
Well, you already did earlier, so we might as well mention that Stipe Ngannou's tonight, baby.
Right.
Oh, my God.
I'm so excited. So... What I like about Sage Northcutt has all this athleticism. I mean, he's the most athletic MMA fighter I think we've ever seen.
But he's also the nicest guy ever, Mr. Steele.
The problem is that he has no killer instinct. He doesn't want to hurt people, which I'm like, some of these guys, and I think Keith Hackney's one of them. It's a guy who I think could win purely based off of he just fucking wants to win. He wants to end your life.
In an era,
he will punch you in the balls. He will elbow you in the back of the head. He does not care. If you're on the ground, he will stomp you. He does not care.
Sage is an athlete.
Yes.
Keith Hackney was a fighter.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say. I mean, there's a difference. Some of these guys, and I'm not going to say. I mean, Keith Hackney.
There's a big difference between Vanderlei Silva and Sage.
Yeah.
Or just any other nice guy of the sport. Like, there's a big difference between some of those guys.
Yeah,
there's fighters and there's athletes. There's George St. Pierre.
Being a good athlete is going to get you so far.
It'll get you world championships if you can make it, right? Yeah.
But the other thing that could get you world championships is just purely being a gritty, I don't care what happens,
a Fedor type of character.
I mean, it's kind of like Eddie Alvarez going into the Justin Gaethje fight. Just to continue to date this thing, it's like Eddie Alvarez going into the Justin Gaethje fight, right? Basically, him saying, "Listen, one of us is going down.
I have no concern for my safety."
He goes, "One of us is going down. If it's me, fine." But
the old Nate
one
Diaz,
of us
approach.
is going down, so let's do it.
Yep.
Like,
I love it.
And I like that attitude. And Keith Hackney, Kevin Rozier,
they embody that warrior spirit.
Who was the other guy? Who was the guy from that I love from last week? Howard.
Oh, Harold Howard.
Harold Howard, right? These early guys, these are the early guys that I think just embody that. And to a certain place, Gordeau, I think probably was one of those guys too.
Yeah.
These are just savage dudes. Yeah, I mean, he was savage fucking fighters. He was a head
stomper
man.
back in the day.
Yeah, these are savages who, they were never going to win fights in the most pretty fashion.
They're
in the
also
world.
trying to prove their legitimacy, I think, which adds a whole different element to this. They are looking to kill guys.
When I wonder if, and this episode is going to go on long, there's no way around it. But I wonder if, because we're not even through the first two fights, and we're almost a half an hour in.
A theme.
This might be an hour. These episodes just keep getting longer. We'll try to keep it to 45 minutes again. What was I thinking? I think Dan Severn might have an interesting case here too, because I think he also has this kind of level of savagery, but what he has these other guys don't is he has discipline. Because that's kind of the other thing you need. Like, again, then being a savage can get you so far, but then now there's this next level, which is you need to be savage. Okay, you need to be a guy who's willing to take risks, willing to stand in front of you and trade, willing to do these takedowns and suplexes and whatever else he does. But you also have to be disciplined, which allows that.
Yep.
And so I think that's the hurdle that these guys can't get over. Keith Hackney's not disciplined. Keith Hackney's not disciplined whatsoever.
No,
he broke his hand on someone because he
gas pedal on the floor.
Yeah, you know what I mean. He's not
100 miles an hour all night.
And if you don't have discipline, it's hard. That's what's so impressive about Royce Gracie. And as we get into the Royce Gracie-Dan Severn fight, the discipline that Royce Gracie showed,
long and far away,
is just incredible.
Longest fight in the history of the sport so far.
No, by far.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah, it was over 15 minutes. Okay. Moving on down, we have Steve Jenham, baby,
powerful Steve Jenham,
making his continued title reign. He is the UFC 3 winner. He's fighting a guy named Melton Bowman, who is a boxer, and they kept calling him like, "Finally, we have a boxer." But I'm like, Art Jenham was a boxer.
Yeah,
he just came out with one. He just came out with one glove on. He just looked crazy
and got beat fast.
Yeah, but he was still a boxer
and ranked.
So so Melton Bowen, I believe. Bowen or Bowen.
Oh boy, he got beat up, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Steve Jenham, baby, looked good. He looked like someone who was deserving of the UFC 3 title.
He mounted him with that beer gut and just headbutted him into oblivion.
I was upset that Steve Jenham won UFC 3 because I was like, that just doesn't seem fair.
It made sense to have him back in the tournament.
It did, and
I was happy to see him back.
He proved that it wasn't
he belonged.
A fluke. Yeah, he belonged in this.
He was a legit fighter.
And he was a legitimate fighter.
I didn't remember Steve before we went back and started doing these. Like, if you had asked me this a few months ago, like, do you remember Steve Jenham? I wouldn't have been able to tell you shit about the guy, but I'm a fan. I'm a fan now.
Really not much to say about the fight. Steve Jenham gets a headbutt, which was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't knock him out or anything, but he gets a headbutt.
Nasty.
There were no TKO finishes on this card whatsoever.
Yeah, that's an interesting point I didn't think about.
It was all subs. I'm trying to think. There's really not much to say. I mean, it was a pretty good fight. I think it was one of the better fights, probably.
Oh, yeah, I
mean,
think so
Steve
too.
Jenham just pretty much controlled him.
It was a good fight for Steve.
Yeah,
but I mean,
it was a fun fight to watch.
It wasn't over quick. We got to see some techniques.
Yeah. Well, and you got to see something out of Steve Jinham that you weren't sure about. You know what I mean? Because, again, this is your champion at the time.
Yeah.
You know, you have to try to put yourself in this position. Like, this was our champion. You know what I mean? This was the guy. So it was nice to see him looking pretty good. And then the last fight in the quarterfinals is Dan Severn taking on Anthony Macias. Okay.
Ooh,
this is the fight I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
This is why I'm not impressed with Dan Severn. First of all, Anthony Macias, how much did he outweigh him by? What's your guess? I don't remember.
80 pounds, 100 pounds?
Oh, it was more. I think it was closer to like 150.
He threw him everywhere.
I mean, I think it was closer to like 150 pounds. I mean, he was just so much bigger than him.
Yeah, but what about Royce and Chemo? I bet that was a bigger discrepancy.
True, but I would say that Dan Severn has way more technique than most of anybody that had fought.
Not in punching. He looked like a fish out of water trying to punch.
Exactly. He looked like a fish out of water trying to punch when it was on the ground.
Yeah, which is weird because, I mean, you had to have like...
I was just not impressed with Dan Severn here, especially in this fight.
His wrestling was
He should have been able to lift this guy up, carry him wherever he wanted to carry him, put his knee in his throat.
Maybe he didn't really want to hurt him. He seems like such a nice guy. He always did. Like, I don't know.
Listen, if that's the case, then I'll accept it. But I feel like that's not the case. I feel like he just wasn't all that good.
You got to feel like maybe he's like 100 pounds bigger than this guy. He's going in here. He's got all these wrestling titles.
I feel like he was just
like,
a wrestler.
I'm just going to throw this dude around and get him out of here.
I mean, what... Let me look at his professional career.
He didn't even really choke him. He just kind of like forearm. It's what Eddie Bravo calls a D-Sev.
This was his... Let me look where this is. This was his first professional MMA fight, for sure.
Yep.
I wasn't sure if he had fought in Vale Tudo or anything. I wasn't sure if he had done anything.
This was it.
So this was his first. I mean, listen, I understand. I love Dan Severn. Got no problem, obviously. No issues with Dan Severn. I'm so excited to see him continue because obviously it's great.
Oh, and he's going to get better, too.
Has some legendary fights in Pride. Has some legendary stuff in the UFC.
He's a monster, man.
He's amazing. He's an amazing personality. I love the dude. Got no issues. I just feel like everybody I hear talk about Dan Severn as it relates to UFC 4, like, oh my God, see how many times he suplexed him. Or suplayed him. Do you hear the guy?
I did.
He kept calling it supplay.
It's so weird.
I've never heard that. Is that what it's actually called?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it's just a suplex.
Yeah.
But anyway, everyone's like, oh, he suplexed him. He's like, yeah, no shit, he suplexed him. He was tiny. He was so tiny. He was like the little mousy Muay Thai guy. He looked like the typical Muay Thai guy.
He didn't really get the chance to do that to Royce.
But listen, but Macias was landing some shit on Dan Severn.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just not impressed. I was like, he should have been able to do. Very, very true.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in context, I hear a lot of people, well, like you, talking about how he was a beast. Then he goes in the Royce Gracie fight. Again, am I the only person who was just not impressed?
Really?
Nothing. What was impressive?
I mean, he was relying. He fell back to his instincts, which is control.
He was just
stay on top and try and control him.
He landed nothing on Royce. At no point was Royce ever in any trouble. We'll wait till we get there. Wait till we get there. Jesus, I'm gonna get all wound up. All right. So Royce Gracie, Keith Hackney then move on to the semifinals. They of course fight. Keith Hackney, I think, now puts up. You know, this is Chemo level putting up a fight. I think he put up more of a fight than Chemo.
Yeah.
I think Keith Hackney let the shiner under there.
Yeah.
You know, the only difference is that Royce was able to continue after the fight with Keith Hackney. He wasn't able to continue after the fight with Chemo.
Yeah.
But really, other than that, it looked like Keith Hackney laid more damage on him and held up more of a fight.
Landed more shots.
As I was watching the Hackney fight, I was like,
some damage on top.
How in the world? Again, a continuation of what I've said in past episodes, and I'm going to say it again when he gets into the Dan Severn fight here, you know, after he wins this one. Every time I'm watching these, I'm like, how does Royce win this thing? What does
How's
he
he
do?
going to do this one?
What does he do to get out of this? And every time he does it, and every time he wins by these submissions,
He's
laying on his back.
Squirrely, man.
It's just incredible. I don't know how people can't keep him out of his guard. But, I mean, it's like now, I mean, obviously everybody could. Like, I saw there was a legitimate debate on whether Royce Gracie, or whether Conor McGregor could beat Royce Gracie. And I was like, guys, Conor McGregor would fucking destroy Royce Gracie. Conor McGregor may submit Royce Gracie, honestly, from the top. Like, I'm just saying, like, you're absolutely batshit crazy if you think
it's all in reference of time. Like,
you have to look at things in historical context.
Yeah.
Like, don't be one of those people who does these big pound for pound brackets and talking about Royce would
they're
be
bullshit anyway.
Listen, and the thing is, like, pound for pound, you have to base it off of at the time. So you could say that Royce Gracie is the pound for pound greatest fighter that ever lived if you're using historical context as your metric for how you're getting the pound for pound.
Beating a shitload of guys who were not well-rounded and had never been in fights before.
Yeah, and I said this, I believe, in one of the earlier episodes, maybe even 2 of the episodes, and I'll go ahead and say it again, and I apologize for being repetitive, but look at who's the pound for pound guy for you right now?
Me, right now,
Yes.
DJ.
Okay, other than DJ, because his is a bit of a unique situation.
Got to give it to George probably after that Bisping fight, the comeback.
And GSP could be an outlier, but I don't think he is. But listen, in 10 years, we'll say John Jones. We'll pretend like he didn't do the fucking steroids, because that's the only way I could even have this argument. So let's say John Jones is the pound for pound, pretending he didn't do the steroids. John Jones in 20 years, it'll be laughable.
He'll be a scrub.
Well, no,
compared to
not
the
him. I'm talking about John Jones in his prime compared to UFC fighters 20 years from now.
Oh yeah,
it'll
the game
be laughable.
is going to change so much.
It'll be laughable. You'll be like, oh my god, John Jones couldn't even hold this dude's shorts.
You can't even take a year off these days. The sport will pass you by so fast.
So I mean, good lord, you think someone like John Jones will get passed by in 20 years? Royce Gracie has been triple lapped by some of the lowest level guys in the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, pick a low level welterweight. They're beating Royce in Royce's prime.
Yeah.
They
and
just are.
Pretty much anybody in the top 15.
And anybody who argues against that, you're either being naive or you're just you're taking offense to something you shouldn't take offense to.
You got rose-colored glasses on.
Something. I don't know what it is, but Royce Gracie could not do anything.
1994 Royce Gracie would lose to any 2018 welterweight.
Yep. I mean, no joke.
Yeah.
And probably not in the UFC. I don't know if he would even be able to compete in the upper levels of like Titan FC and stuff. I mean,
imagine him fighting like a fucking Rory McDonald.
I mean, Jesus Christ.
It would be brutal.
He would just, oh, God. In his prime. We're talking about in his prime. We're not even talking about now. We're talking about in his prime.
94 Royce, or we'll even say like 97, 98 Royce.
But anyway, at the time, and this is what's important, and it's the same argument used for people like Ronda Rousey, at the time, he was so leaps and bounds above everybody else. And that's what matters. That's what truly matters, is that he, when he came into the sport, it was like he was playing a different one. You know, and he was he was so much better than everybody. And that's what you can't forget. You can't forget that. You cannot forget the fact that Royce Gracie at the time was just incredible.
Nobody could beat him.
Nobody.
Nobody could beat him.
And even if it looked like he was losing and looked like he was getting dominated,
still strangle.
It was all part of his plan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is who he was.
He was a legend, man. Legendary.
This is his third UFC that he's won. The only UFC that he did not win was the one he did not compete in.
Well, yeah, the one that he quit.
Oh, no. Sorry. One he didn't compete at all, did he? And then another one, let me look. I think he did not compete in, was it UFC 2? No, he did. So he won UFC 1, won UFC 2.
And then 3 was
had
the
to
chemo
pull
fight.
out of UFC 3, and then won UFC 4. Got it. Okay. And UFC 5 is the infamous, yeah. We'll get to that for UFC 5. I don't want to give it away.
We're getting there.
God, I'm not looking forward to watching that fight at all. Okay. What else we got here? Anything else from Keith Acme?
Savage.
The other semifinal fight, Marcus Bassett, I believe it's Bassett. Call Marcus again, karate practitioner. He is coming in as an alternate to fight Dan Severn, but remember, he did fight in an alternate bout, so that's good. He's not coming in completely fresh. You know, he did take some damage and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Fighting Dan Severn. Didn't seem to matter. Dan Severn blew past him.
Right.
Now, that was impressive.
Yeah.
That was more impressive to me than the first fight, which, again, I think it's flipped. I think people are way more impressed with the first fight. I'm way more impressed with the second fight. It's just the technique of the
first fight, I think. Just the
soup, because we hadn't seen a suplex.
Those souplays were so nasty.
Souplays, stop it, Matt. Why did the guy keep calling him souplays?
I don't know, dude.
It's like, sounds like souffle. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a food, souffle. not much to talk about. I mean, it was just Dan Severn was just way better.
Yeah.
I mean, just wrestle
fuck
down.
him.
Yeah, wrestle fucked him. I mean, it was just, what are you going to do? All right, now we move on to the finals so we can try to end this episode. Hoist Gracie taking on Dan Severn. Listen, the reason why I'm not impressed with Dan is because Dan should, again, all he did was take him to, he did what everybody yells at. This is the most dated episode ever. Like, I literally could not have dated this episode anymore.
That's fine.
I just feel bad because I was really trying not to do that.
And once in a while.
I know. Dan Severn, he did what people yell at guys like Colby Covington and guys like Usman about, which is he just laid on top of him and just kept moving around in a circle. He barely punched him. He didn't land any elbows. He did nothing. Hoist, listen.
Was he trying to tire him out, or did he just not have a plan?
It's bizarre. I think he just didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I just don't know what to do
I'm just
now
going to
that I'm
hold him
down
down
here.
until he quits.
Basically, just
See if he quits.
assuming that he would quit or something. And I was talking to a buddy, and I'm not going to out him because I disagree with him, so I don't want to, you know what I mean? But, he was just saying like that, like how impressive it was that Dan Severn was doing that. I'm like, I don't think it was impressive. I think that was literally a part of Hoist's plan. Hoist wanted to be on his back because that's where he fights from.
And Dan's used to being on top of guys.
So he basically just said,
I could see
let's let it happen, and I'm just going to stay here, keep moving around, roll around. Okay, block that, land a little heel to your back, land a little punch to the side of your face, doesn't do anything, and all right, here's my time.
When I look back,
he was so disciplined. It
when
was
I
incredible.
look back on 4, I feel like Dan was the first legit challenger, at least. Like,
See,
in terms
I disagree.
In terms of his pedigree,
I think Keith Hackney Keith Hackney and Chemo leaps and bounds put up a better fight against Hoist than Dan Severn.
Chemo just
The only difference is
crushed him.
is that Dan Severn lasted for almost 16 minutes.
Yeah, in better shape than all those guys.
So that's the only difference. I don't think he put up any more of a fight. I think he played into Hoist's game plan, and Hoist was just willing to stay in that position for however long he needed to until, all right, fine, guys. Time to end it. You know what I mean? I got you softened up. I see my opening. He was just really disciplined. I don't think Hoist was never in any real trouble. There was a kind of a triangle attempt at one point that looked like it was like, Dan Severn's pretty strong, so we'll see. But I think that Keith Hackney put up a way better fight against Hoist.
Maybe.
I mean, he took a couple shots in the feet. Looked like he could have been knocked out or something. Like, I don't know. I just wasn't impressed.
Keith Hackney tried that legendary slap, too, against Hoist a couple times.
Love it. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it. So, yeah, Steve Jinham very well could have gone on,
Yeah.
He got injured. He wasn't
like he
able
had
to
the
continue.
tools.
He would have fought Dan Severn. I mean, I'd imagine Dan Severn would have won that fight, but I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
We will never know. Or maybe we will know. I don't know. I haven't really looked ahead. I briefly looked ahead to UFC 5, and of course, I know about one fight. I know about the Gracie Shamrock fight from
There's
UFC
one thing
5.
that we do at the end of these episodes every week that we still got to do.
Okay, give it to me.
What's the name of the event?
Okay, the name of UFC 5 is The Return of the Beast. God, these titles, man.
Well, now you got to see if Dan Severn's back.
All right. Let me give you the fights. I'll give you the quarterfinal semi.
If it's called the
I'll
Return
give you
of
the
Beast
quarterfinal,
and Dan's there, that's just hilarious.
Okay, here are the quarterfinal fights. Okay, we have John Hess taking on Andy Anderson. We have Todd Medina taking on Larry Curtin. I don't know any of those first 4 people. I know 0 of those people. We have Oleg Taktarov.
Okay,
Taktarov.
That guy is a legend.
He's a Sambo.
He's a legend in the early days. He is a badass.
Taking on Ernie Verdicchia.
Rip in peace. I don't know if that guy really died or anything. I'm just saying he fought Oleg back in the day. Oleg was scary.
Dan Severn.
He is back.
Taking on Joe Charles.
So they named this event after fucking Dan.
Here's what's nice. Joe Charles was the guy who didn't get a chance to fight Dan Severn because he was the alternate that lost the coin flip. In UFC 5, he gets to fight him.
That's the Return of the
Good
Beast.
job, UFC. Well, you nailed it.
All
That's
right.
exactly what you should have done.
Sure.
Good job. Okay, I'm trying to think. Anything else we want to do before we go? We're almost at 45 minutes.
No, I think
Nothing
I'm
else?
good. I'm ready to
All
go.
right, guys. That was a blast. Matt, just in case people stick around and listen to these things all the way through, please tell us where to find you.
At Hitchcock87.
And what is your Twitter name?
At Hitchcock87. Oh, Lil Young Mane. That's my rap name.
Right. You can find the podcast at LoudMouth MMA. Please tell your friends about this series. This is a lot of fun.
I love this.
I think this was the most fun episode we've done so far.
It gets better every week.
I'm not going to date the next one. I need to take quite a few breaks before I really date the one.
Spoiler, he dates it.
Spoiler alert. I'm going to date UFC 5.
See you guys.
Can't see